One of the things to remember in psychology is that a lot of the things that psychologists are interested in are things that you cannot see, hear, smell, feel, and taste. Intelligence is one of those things. You cannot directly see someone's intelligence. You have to find a way to assess it. You have to find a way to test it in order to really know whether or not someone is intelligent. And so a psychometric approach is to measure intelligence through psychological testing, to give them various kinds of tests to measure someone's intelligence. Alfred Binet was a pioneer in this particular goal. He and Theodore Simon developed questions to predict children's progress in future progress in the Paris school system. So basically, he was interested in some children were having trouble moving on to the next grade and having trouble being successful. So he wanted to find ways to help predict which children are going to be more successful than others. And again, this is a noble cause that he wanted to do to help students have a better chance of success. So that's when he decided to measure intelligence. So Alfred Binet created an intelligence test, and a psychologist named Louis Terman in the United States kind of adapted this test for American children and called it the Stanford Binet Intelligence Test. And this test is still it's been modified many times, but it still is in existence and still used today. So the Stanford Binet Intelligence Test is a commonly used test of intelligence, or at least modern version of it. One kind of a shorthand way of measuring intelligence, there was a formula developed by William Stern to do this intelligence quotient, to form this one. Now, so it's basically you take your mental age and divide it by your chronological. Well, what is your mental age? Your mental age is your intellectual age at which you're functioning. So if you are a 10-year-old, you might have a mental age of a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old. And in that case, you would need to, you can put that into your formula. So for example, let's say you have a mental age of 5 and a chronological age of 10. So you have the mental age of a 5-year-old, but the chronological age of a 10-year-old. 5 over 10 multiplied by 100 means you'd have an IQ of 5 over 10 times 100, which is 50. An IQ of 50, which is a low IQ. Ideally, if your mental age and your chronological age are the same, so if you are a 10-year-old and you have the mental age of a 10-year-old, then your IQ would be 100, which would be considered normal. Now, this is an original way of looking at what an IQ score is, but nowadays, IQ is informed with this simple mathematical equation. It's a little bit more complex than that. It's based on population values through testing many thousands of people, different age groups, being able to see where the norms lie. And this has to do with using the normal curve, normal distribution, to essentially see where people fall on that distribution. And essentially, the score of 100 would be kind of in the middle of that distribution, but it wouldn't necessarily be based on this particular formula. Another set of intelligence tests comes from David Wechsler. He has an adult intelligence scale and also an intelligence scale for children. And these kind of tests have some interesting aspects to it. It's not just a simple, here's a questionnaire, fill out the multiple choice questionnaire to answer the questions and see if what your score is, how many you got correct. With the Wechsler tests, usually they are given one-on-one, where you have a tester who sits with the person taking the test and kind of asks them questions. And the questions that they may ask may not be the ones you might traditionally see on a questionnaire. It might be like solving a puzzle. So for example, this child is being asked to match the picture in that pad with those blocks. Put those blocks together to match that picture. And it's a measure of a different type of intelligence if you think about it that way. It's not just simply asking, how many years does President of the United States serve, or something like that. So here are some other examples of that you might see on a Wechsler test, arranging pictures to see, which sequence is correct, to arrange the pictures in the correct sequence. There might be comprehension questions such as, the subscale is this. So why do individuals buy automobile insurance? The idea is to test someone's common sense and judgment. So again, there are a number of different ways in which intelligence could be assessed. The Wechsler uses a number of different scales. So they have both verbal scales and nonverbal subscales, which essentially can see your nonverbal intelligence, which might be useful for someone whose language skills may not be very good. So how well do these intelligence tests predict performance? Well, they do a pretty good job. They're highly reliable, and they are predictive of some important things. They are predictive of your performance in school. There's a high correlation between your scores that you have on your on an IQ test and the number of years of schooling. So, what these intelligence tests seem to do pretty well is they seem to be able to predict how well you do in school. However, you still may have to step back and think, is that how we define intelligence? Is intelligence defined by how well a person does in school, or is there more to it than just that? And that is a big question when it comes to understanding intelligence. So here are some aspects of intelligence tests that are very important for making a good test: validity, reliability, standardization. First of all, validity. Does the test measure what it purports to measure? Are you actually measuring what you think you're measuring? And this is a big question when it comes to intelligence tests. Maybe you're not really testing intelligence. Maybe you're testing someone's ability to take a test. Is test-taking ability the equivalent of intelligence? Not really. Someone who does well in school, they're good at test-taking. Someone who does well on an IQ test, they're good at test-taking. But it's not necessarily the same thing as intelligence. So this could be a question of the validity of intelligence tests. But nevertheless, you can still be able to maybe name it something else, but in other words, you may be making an aptitude test for college, and if your test predicts how well people will do in college, then it sounds like your test is valid. Reliability. Is the test performance consistent? Are you going to have people who score high on an intelligence test on Tuesday, and then when they take it on Thursday, their scores are going to be really low, or scores are going to be all over the place? Are the items within the scale, are smart people and getting most of them correct, and not so smart people getting most of them wrong? Are you getting consistent scores both within the test as well as if you are tested again on the same people? You should be getting some kind of consistency. If it's not consistent, it's not valid, and it's certainly not reliable. Finally, standardization is important. One of the things you want to be able to do with intelligence tests is be able to use the same procedures for administering them, for scoring them. That way you can compare one person's score with scores of people his age in the population, and you can basically be able to compare people based on their age group and whatnot, and it allows you to kind of have the score be more meaningful because you're comparing it in relation to other people scoring on that test. Which brings us to the concept of normal distribution. When you look at intelligence IQ tests measured in the general population, you will find that the scores are pretty much normally distributed. Normal distribution has a particular type of shape. It is a bell-shaped curve indicating where the majority of the scores are kind of in the middle, and they peter out toward the end. It's not a crooked distribution. It's symmetrical. Each side is the same. Over here you have high scores on IQ. Over here you have low scores on IQ. And the really super high super geniuses, there aren't that many of them. The people with severe mental retardation, who scored very low, not too many of them. Most people kind of in this realm here. And the way the normal distribution is set up, it's symmetrical, so you can essentially see how people do. So, for example, if we're talking about IQ scores between 84 and 116, if we look at this, if this is the way the distribution is spread, then you could say that about 68% of people in the population score between 84 and 116. Some a little bit better than average, some a little bit worse than average. And you'd be able to see where a person's score could fit into this distribution, so you can compare yourselves with others. And again, that's what we always like to do. We'd like to see, well, how does my IQ score compare with people my age? Another interesting phenomenon that comes from intelligence testing is what is called the Flynn Effect. And what's been shown is that over the past 60 years, intelligence scores, for some reason, have gotten higher. They've risen steadily by an average of 27 points. And this is called the Flynn Effect. Why is it that scores essentially have jumped ahead? There are many different explanations for this. Our schooling system has changed over the past 60 years. Pretty much everybody goes to school, and we live in a more complex society that requires more knowledge, that maybe require more testing than just simple farm work, let's say. So that could be an explanation. It doesn't necessarily mean that we are getting genetically smarter. It just means that we perhaps have more technology now that we can use to improve our intelligence that we didn't have in the past. Okay, so here they're comparing like 1932 and 1997. There's a greater number of people in 1997 who would fit that intellectually very superior rank that they had in the past. But again, a lot of it has to do with advances in our society, advances in nutrition, advances in computers and whatnot, that we're able to find ways to stimulate and practice and grow our intelligence now that we did not have in the past.